Hello there and welcome to this vlog of October 2022, and today's video is going to be a bit of an in-depth look at the regiment that I have created for the Dusk Haunters. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, if you've been watching this channel for any length of time, that I've done this video quite a few times, and you would be correct. The reason why I keep updating it is so that you can also, anyone getting into BattleTech can see how to kind of organically grow your, whether it's a unit that you've created yourself, like I have with the Dusk Haunters, or whether it's a force within one of the inner sphere powers or a clan power. You can get as broad as you want, really, and when it comes to the force build. Obviously, there is I suppose a narrative thread that we all hang our hats on when it comes to, actually making these forces. I've said numerous times actually before about mercenary unit creation, which I think is the superior way to do it when it comes to the hobby, because it's just so flexible. But I've said before previously that when you're creating your force, it's almost like you are living vicariously through that force in your BattleTech journey or your hobby journey as well. So for instance, I start my BattleTech journey, if you want to put it that way. It sounds a bit weird that, but I started in the end of the Succession Wars, and then thus far I've never really ventured past the Fedcom Civil War. So the Dusk Haunters kind of exist within that time period, and when I first started getting really back into BattleTech, and then obviously Catalyst started the new plastic Kickstarters that have come around over the last couple of years, I was quite happy just with having a couple of companies for the Dusk Haunters. I was well, I'll probably have maybe a company that exists between 3025 and 3050, and then I'll have another company that are post clan invasion, so there's maybe some clan mechs in there and some of the more sophisticated technology. And for the longest time I was absolutely happy doing that. And if you actually go back and find the the videos that I did a year ago now, I think even at that point, as we were getting the second Kickstarter, I was very much in the mindset of, the Dusk Haunters are fine just as a mercenary unit that I'll collect alongside all the other major powers. But as things have gone on, and as we've kind of had more intel from the next Kickstarter that we are getting, I think as well another factor is that I do like to buy things. I'm pretty compulsive, so being able to kind of go and then get the plastics at retail after the Kickstarter has been really kind of a major factor in terms of where I've developed this force and what direction I've gone in with it. Had I not been able to do that, I genuinely don't think this would be anything as big as it is. So Catalyst game plan has therefore worked with me, because they've probably, I don't know, made 10 times more money out of me than they would have done if they'd have just done half of the mechs that they'd done, which still would have been great. But just the fact that I can get access to all this now really quite easily. I mean, even now, on retail, I was just looking again this weekend, and there are all the gaming stores have just flooded with it. Now it's selling. BattleTech does sell quite well in the UK, but you can basically get anything at the moment from all the Wave 1 and Wave 2 collections. Obviously Alpha Strike's on the way out soon, so it's just it's a real magical time, especially if you're into the force building side like I am. And before I get into this, really, I think I'll just give a bit of a synopsis of, again, I may have said this before, but I don't think I've done a video like this for months, so probably good that I'm doing a little update. But I'll give a little synopsis on the kind of the Dusk Haunters and the size of the unit now, and why. And this sounds really quite sad, but I'm very proud of this. It's somebody made a really funny comment on one of these videos that really made me laugh, and it really stuck with me. And I mean, they were making it flippantly, and apologies if this offends anybody, but they called my list here weaponized autism, which really made me laugh. I mean, I am not diagnosed autistic, but I think I have probably, I think I'd have been born maybe 10, 15 years like later than I was. I probably am on that scale at some level. I certainly do things like this in my own job when I'm project managing. So like I really kind of go into like granular detail, and like everything's got to be accurate and everything's got to be named correctly. But again, I'm always careful kind of wading into that discussion, because, I don't like it if people kind of use that as some kind of, whether even if it's a positive term, people will say like OCD. I really try not to do that, because I think it's very dismissive. Like, you don't have to like belittle someone else to say that you are very, for want of a better term, accurate in something like this. It could just be that with me. But either way, I've got that comment really kind of made me laugh. So there we go. But in a sense, regardless of the, what the kind of underlying meaning of that meant, it's still true that this is quite an accurate list, and I've really kind of gone into a pretty like heavy level of detail on this. And the reason I keep showing this is just to kind of demonstrate how far you can get into this, and how much this has taken me just like hours and hours and hours, but I find it actually quite therapeutic. And it's not just this either, obviously. It's the it's then the hobby side of it. So it's then painting and getting everything like accurate, and giving the mechs the correct numbers, and giving them all like a bespoke feel. So for instance, like I might have like a Draconis Combine Lance that have kind of got like the Draconis colours, but with like maybe some Dusk Haunter, purple and yellow piping or something like that. And I just find it very fun to do that. And when this full regiment is complete, I think it's going to come in at about, I'm trying to remember the exact number, I think it was about 210 units, and I think it sits at about 160 mechs, and the rest are like vehicles and infantry and VTOLs and things like that. But yeah, like it's just something that, to be honest, I really am kind of living my like childhood fantasy here, because if I could have done this when I was like 12, 13, 14 years old, well, to be fair, it probably would have been a bad thing, so I probably would have never gone to school. This is all I would have focused on. Now, I can obviously make it real, because I've got the like disposable income to do that. So that's like a real privilege for me to actually get this, and, get it all painted up, and then put it all into like a cabinet. And it just, it's like I said, it's a bucket list thing. But I love the therapy that you get from it, so to speak, when you're kind of getting the lists accurate, and then getting and hobby as well, which is a very therapeutic thing. It is for me anyway. Like, I love to sit and paint, and I've painted thousands of things over the last like couple of years now. But just in terms then of the Dusk Haunters, and again, it's just, if you go back and you watch the previous videos, you'll know how far this has come now, because I think I was very clear in one of the early videos that I did, which was very much like, just a couple of companies will be fine. I think like the next video I did, it was like, well, I've decided to go battalion, and I did actually do one, I think, on the regiment. This is still the regiment, but it's an extended regiment. And there's a lot going on in this regiment as well. So some of it actually, just for want of a better term, marches on paper. That's like the aerotech element to this. I don't bother playing with the aerotech in BattleTech anymore. I don't particularly like the rules. So what I do instead is I swap out to the support. What do they call it now? The support card pack. Can't remember the exact terms, where you get artillery and airstrikes and things like that, which I love that support pack. I think it's fantastic. And that really kind of gave me the excuse to, I literally took all the aero space that I had on, and I had quite a bit of it actually. I just took it all off their standees, and I put them all on like flat bases, just to be used as like terrain on like an airport, mission or something like that. I really just don't want them anymore. Do want VTOLs though. VTOLs are very different, because VTOLs are very much a part of a regular battlefield, in that, like they can hover and stop and, do everything that a normal unit does. Whereas air support just flies across and bombs or strafes or whatever. So I've taken that bit out of it and put it into the card set. So even though I will talk through here the Dusk Haunters like aerotech or whatever you want to call it facility, it all marches on paper. It doesn't actually exist. And where you see that happening, I've just put in brackets next to the name of the unit. It just says no model next to it. You'll also see that I also have this old model in brackets here. I made a very, very conscious decision early on that in every single company for the Dusk Haunters, and actually for all the other mercenary units I've collected, of which there are a lot. I've done previous videos on that actually. So the Dusk Haunters are mine, obviously. They don't exist in universe canon, but all the stuff that I've got from the canon universe all has at least one old like Relpath or Ironwind model in there. Exactly same for the Dusk Haunters. It's in every single company. Again, why did I do that? Well, I do actually think there are some fantastic old models. You know, I don't think it's a matter of that Catalyst are just replacing everything now. So sometimes I need to go and get an old model because they don't actually exist in plastic. I can actually see one here that doesn't exist in the current plastic, and that's the Mauler, which is just on row 27 there. So I had no choice with the Mauler, but if not, if they had have brought the Mauler out, there would have been another you know, metal model in here somewhere just to kind of fulfill that criteria of having at least one. And I actively do that just to continue to support like Relpath and Ironwind metals. Again, personal choice. I know some people will be completely at the opposite ends of that. So some people won't want any of the old metal models at all, and some people won't want any of the new plastics. I'm not in the middle of it. I'm probably 75%, 80% towards the new plastics because they're much easier to deal with. But I'm quite happy to have a bit of a flavour in there of the old metal models. So then, what I'll do is I'm just going to give a quick like breakdown of how this regiment works and like what just things to keep a lookout for. So the one that I've said already is anything in brackets that's like really important, like what the model is, or even if there is no model, is in brackets there. If it is like this purple with yellow copy, like with the writing, then that means that it's a model that is painted. If we go down here, you can see if it's in green, it means that I own it, but it's not painted yet, such as the Raven here. If it's in black, the black one's quite an interesting one. That means that I'll be getting it shortly. So this Locust here, for instance, is, I believe, the Locust from the new... yes, no, I'm just trying to think where I'm getting that. It's not in one of the new mercenary boxes, so it must be in the new Alpha Strike box set, which I think it is. I think that is the 1S variant that we're getting there. It's the variant of the Locust with the SRMs in the arms. It doesn't have arms, but on the side of the Locust. So anything in black is something that I'll know I'll be getting over the next few months. And then there's this weird colour, this like brown colour, and this is anything that's going to be coming up in the new Kickstarter. So you see here there's like the Goliath and the Scorpion there. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to talk through, I'll kind of combine this with like lore and how that kind of, you know, again going back to that living vicariously through this mercenary unit in the BattleTech universe, how that kind of lore ties in to what I've done here kind of on the hobby side, and how the kind of Dusk Haunters journey go from like being really like a tiny little lance of mechs that are, I mean, I don't usually talk about this because it's all ifs and buts, but I am writing a novel for the Dusk Haunters. Whether or not that publishes or not, or whether I just do it like privately for my own, you know, like satisfaction, is yet to be seen. But the lore on this is, again, this is why I find this actually very therapeutic and good to do, just for my own writing, because it's something I can just refer back to continuously. And just see, oh yes, okay, this is where we're at in this time period. This is the access of, you know, what like units they have got, and that just gives me a real like consistency to it. People have commented on these videos before saying that like the level of data that I actually go into is probably far more than you get on like a regular whether it's like a role-playing game or if you're just doing like a massive campaign over a few years in terms of a wider narrative series that you're playing with your friend group. The reason for that is because I'm actually tying this into the novel, so I really do need that like minutiae of data for accuracy and for reference. So I think that is more why I do that, to be honest. It's not just me being like, wanting to spill loads of time into this. It does tally up with the other project, which is the writing. I've always written for the Dusk Haunters, like since I ever conceived them when I was like, conceived of them when I was like a teenager. I've always written like short stories for them. I've still got a lot of those like notes. What I'm going to do now, the first thing that I'm writing here though is like the first part of their journey, which is basically how they get Kismet Lance, which is the catapult, the Lancelot, the Wolverine, and the Enforcer. The four people that operate those mechs as well are kind of obviously the main characters within the Dusk Haunters. There is a main founder, but it's kind of it's a family affair. It's cousins who found the Dusk Haunters, and then they kind of just. I mean, in my like lore for them, they have the first dropship that they get is actually a brine transport, which is I quite like that. It's like they start off like as low on the ladder as you can get. The main character basically gets kicked out of military school. It's an in-law school called the Warriors Hall. It's like a Davian military facility, and they're kind of noted for their hatred of Capellans. In the Capellan March, he basically gets thrown out of there, and he ends up with one of his like friends who's not actually involved in the kind of first part of the narrative, but one of his friends and he basically steal an enforcer. And he does that because his home, Mendham, which is where they come from, which is quite deep in the Capellan March near the Taurian border, the Fed Sons are just not giving any support there really militarily, because this is in 3025 and things are, this isn't the whole memory core hasn't been discovered yet. We're just on kind of the verge of like the Renaissance in technology. The Capellans are still pretty bold at that point in this area and are making like raids into Federated Sun space. And he basically is so appalled that that his like home planet where he was brought up and where his cousin still lives, who's his like partner in crime, that he goes back there to try and basically save they're a pretty like well-off family, in terms of where they place on Mendham, but he goes back there to defend the holdings of theirs of the family against the Capellan raids, and affects. I'm not going to go into massive levels of detail here, but he effectively looks out massively and ends up being able to get hold of a Capellan catapult, and that catapult then, called Mina, becomes his like chariot for the remainder of the narrative. They were both the cousins were piloting mechs from like a very young age. So the other mech that they've got in the family, the Enforcer they stole obviously, but the traditional family mech is the Wolverine there, Callisto. That's piloted by his cousin, and basically in the attack, in the raid, they lose. They have like a factory. Mendham's like a pretty solid industrial base of a planet. There is like a famous factory there. I think it's just called like Mendham Electronics or something like that. But the factory that they've got is like pretty successful, but it gets blown up by the Capellans. So they end up, the insurance money that they get from that, they end up basically, that gives them the ability to maintain these two mechs, and then they manage to kind of get passage on this brine transport Leopard, which has been converted from a military vehicle into a civilian, or like a capital vehicle for business, and it's kind of the first like book that I've written for them, and it's almost like it's a bit of a comedy of errors. Like they are just so out of their depth, and it's just a bit of a disaster like in the first year or two of their like inception. It's just the story about like how they kind of come across the other particular here the Lancelot, which if you've noticed there just from the variant, it's actually a very, very powerful variant of the Lancelot. That it's one from the Star League era, the 01. So it has got double heat sinks. It's basically when they find that their fortunes start to change a little bit and people start to take them a little bit more serious. It's not just like a broken down like old Wolverine, a stone enforcer, and a catapult that they barely know how to pilot. They also get this really, really amazing Lancelot. And it's kind of, they're all kind of young at the time. Mendham is so far, out of Federated Sun Central that you can do a lot more there in terms of the narrative and have a lot more fun with it. It's not like you're on New Avalon and everything's being written about. Mendham is based. I don't remember ever reading about Mendham in one of the books, or it's basically just like a blank canvas for what you can do there. So that's kind of how the Dusk Haunters get their start. And, for the first couple of years, it really is like touch and go as to, if they survive or not. Eventually, though, and as you'd expect, because they are going to, in terms of the narratives that I write for them and the fact that I play up to 3067, it's not just like they exist for 3 years and then they disappear. Obviously, they survive. So there is some plot armor there because I need them to kind of go on so I can collect all the mechs for them and write the stories from in the clan invasion and stuff like that. But they kind of get their real big break in 3028. And in 3028, I'm not going to go into massive details here. If I ever kind of really push on with the novel writing, I've got lots of ideas for what I want to do there. But they effectively amalgamate with a couple of other mercenary units under the umbrella of the Dusk Haunters and the original. Well, at that time he'd be a captain because he'd have a company under him. So he's the chap's called Lemuel, who's got the catapult, and that's where things start getting more pronounced and serious. For instance, they come into contact with a Free Worlds League force, and they've got a really solid lance. They can see the High Roller lance. That's an Orion, a Marauder, a Hunchback, and a Trebuchet. I try to keep this as lore appropriate as possible. So an Orion, a Marauder, and a Hunchback, and a Trebuchet is very Free Worlds League-y. And another thing there as well, they kind of come in contact with it's. Again, I won't give you too much detail because I don't even know myself. I've only kind of put the skeletal frame on where I want to go in this with the narrative. But there is this massive insurrection on Mendham, and they end up, it kind of turns out that the Capellans and the Fed Sons have to slightly work together on something to stop a bit of a greater evil. So they have an ad hoc lance, a very powerful lance, which is the King Crab, the Victor, the Warhammer, and the Archer, which in 3028 is about as powerful a lance as you can get in the Inner Sphere. And that once they get the access to those two things in 3028, things really kind of start to get better for them. At that point as well, in terms of how I've written this, they get access to their dropship Leopard, which is known as the Solution, which is the brine extracting or carrying Leopard. Brine being a solution in chemical terms, hence the name of the ship. So they keep it called the Solution. That then becomes their flagship, and they get a couple of other assets as well on the aero space front, or the dropship front, as you'd expect, because they've got 12 mechs at this point. And at that time period, I think when you get past 3028 with them, they become an actual serious mercenary unit at that time. It's got a staff and it's got things going on, and that then again, just from my gaming perspective, that gives me a very nice launch pad then to launch into that post discovery of the Helm Memory Core, and then into the War of 3039. You can see then that there is then I should mention that the first Dusk Haunters company is called the Azalea Company, named after one of their allies, who they come across at some point, a lady called Azalea. The second Dusk Haunters, though, which is Bandoliera Company, this is something that takes them, you see it's a long time for them to actually get this second company together. Or they do have more assets in 3029, we'll go into that, but it's more vehicles and VTOLs. You can't see them on the screen at the moment, though. And what I did then, because I've one of my like secret loves in BattleTech is actually St. Ives, which is the area of space which basically defects from the Capellans in, I think it is 3028 or 3029. Can't remember the exact year. But I think it kind of in law terms, what happens is you get this with the Rasselhag Republic as well, like very disenfranchised areas break away from their, the big inner sphere collective power. So the Draconis Combine lose the Rasselhag Republic, it becomes an independent state. Likewise, the Capellans lose St. Ives, which becomes an independent state as well. And I think it's because it's at the end of the succession wars. It kind of is seen like everyone is so sick and tired of fighting, even the belligerent powers like the Draconis Combine and the Capellan Confederation. They just decide, just let them have it, forget about it. Now, both powers don't last that long. They last a very similar length of time, actually, but they're kind of present all throughout or into the clan invasion, and then both disappear. But in this time period, I have a real affinity for St. Ives. In fact, although I've always considered myself like a Fed Sons player, or my sympathies lie with the Fed Sons. I think if I'd have been more like geopolitically savvy when I was a kid, I would have probably gone St. Ives, because they're almost like an Eastern European power, or like one of the Baltic nations that broke away from the Soviet Union. And I have a lot of sympathy for those nations anyway. So I think and they were that's when the St. Ives really kind of came around during the fall of the Berlin Wall. So I think it is very much like St. Ives is a modern day, Poland or Latvia or one of the ex-Soviet bloc countries. And I really, really like them. I like everything about them. They're very good warriors as well. Like little known facts about St. Ives, like they send some incredible units during Operation Bulldog to help destroy Smoke Jaguar. They're a very, very competent military. They've got very brave warriors, and the best thing about them, because it's like an ex-Capellan state or colony or whatever you want to call it. It basically has access to those incredible Capellan mechs, which I love so much. You can completely get Vindicators and Catapults and Cataphracts and Ravens in your St. Ives force, because some of the factories were there. They know how to produce these things. So it is almost like a best of both worlds situation. And I think in this time period, this is something I've done quite recently. Actually, I was like, I'm going to put the Dusk Haunters there at that time, and kind of in my in-universe lore, they get hired by St. Ives as a mercenary group who have found some recent success by 3028, and they've been fighting Capellans for the longest time at that point. They've had success against them, and they've also had there's a dalliance with the Capellans as well. You can see there in the Azalea Company, there are 2 Capellan mech warriors. So they understand the Capellans. They've been fighting the Capellans on Mendham for years and years. Not the actual people who created the Dusk Haunters, but they've got a history with them. So they get hired by the St. Ives to go in and basically train their troops in they are literally have just come off the cusp of fighting the Capellans. So tell us how you had success in doing that. This is the lance here, which is Discus Lance, is one of my favourite lances actually that I've got, because I just adore those mechs. So it's the Cyclops, the Longbarrow, the Grasshopper, and the Cataphract. I've built it in that the love interest for the main character basically is the lady who operates the Grasshopper here. So she's kind of within the St. Ives military structure, so to speak. So there's kind of, I think if I ever do go that far into the novels, and who knows, that will be a direction to take. I think this time period as well, this is my favourite bit for the notes that I've got on the current structure of where I want to go in terms of the narrative. This is the bit that I do that I think is the most fun, which is where they kind of come across. You can see I've got it listed as a disgraced Comstar adept and a disgraced interstellar expeditions archaeologist, who have got, they obviously know how to pilot mechs in their own right, and they've also got a couple of hired well, you should really say ex-gladiator mech warriors, I suppose, but that's in like an Annihilator and a Marauder 2. So we've got some, like, they're getting some real big hitting mechs by this point, and they do a bit of like lost tech hunting, and you can't not run a BattleTech like narrative and not have some lost tech hunting, right? Like that's one of the real fun things to do in BattleTech. So that's why, they kind of get, in a sense, the Dusk Haunters get hired by this ex. I mean, it's the Comstar Adept's a funny one, because I don't think you can technically leave Comstar. They'll probably just assassinate you. But I'll write in some weird get out for that character. And obviously they hate, or famously, Interstellar Expeditions hate Comstar and vice versa. So there's some kind of interesting dynamic there on how those two got together and what they are looking for. And then really, like, I think at this point, like, the rest, you'll see the rest of the forces that I get as I go down here, because you'll see there's a lot of vehicles and there's a lot of like new tech coming in, but there isn't that much in way of this initial like the first battalion here, which is what I've just termed the combat and skirmish battalion. And that is because, like, again, they pad out the force with, like I said, with so many vehicles and so many, like, non-mech units. So it's only really kind of after the clan invasion that they start getting this massive influx in mechs to build the regiment. And that actually ties in very neatly to the to BattleTech narrative. Because at this time, like in 3025, mechs are rare. Like, they're not, especially like out on the frontier of like Federated Suns, like space, it's not, they're not common, whereas after, when they start the Renaissance up again, the factories start coming back and they get better technology. At that point, forces are churning out mechs a lot quicker. Then obviously you have the clan invasion and all the technology that comes from that, plus all the salvage, that kind of thing. So it ties into that. I think the only thing that I've got completely wrong on a narrative level, but I make no apology for this whatsoever, because I personally think that the way to do what I'm going to talk about now is quite boring, is that you've got so much variety of mechs in these companies. That's completely incorrect in terms of the structure of how a company would look. You'd usually find a company have, say, for instance, like there'd be 4 Centurions and 4 Trebuchets and 4 Jenners or something like that. Because if you think about it from a military point of view, you want the same components, or components that you can swap out easily and that you have lots of. Where you've got companies like this where it's just completely mixed, it's in a military term, that is not feasible. That would never happen. But I've really got no interest in just creating like an entire company of hunchbacks or something like that. Just really bores me. I want it to be very diverse and colourful, and have lots of like narrative threads there with what forces are, or what mech warriors are piloting what mechs, and have a background story to that. You can do that if you were just like, I'll have a company of urban mechs, but it just loses some of the flavour. It's like this, if you look at the Caber lands here, you can see there an Annihilator, Marauder 2, a Crockett and a Stalker, piloted respectively by Gladiator mech warriors, disgraced Comstar Adepts, and that disgraced Interstellar Expeditions archaeologist. That's just got so much more colour to it. And I mean, it's a ridiculous lances that is so... maybe on tabletop it's not the most powerful, because the Annihilator is incredibly slow, so I don't know how much, it's basically just like a walking turret, and a very slow walking turret, so I don't know how great that would be. I've not played that much of an Annihilator on tabletop, but like it's threatening. It looks like it stands out, that land stands out, whereas 4 hunchbacks wouldn't. So that's why I've done that. And sorry, I went on a massive tangent there, but what I was going to talk about is, you can see there's a 17-year period between them actually completing Bandolera Company, and that's when they get the basically the very famous Innisphere clan invasion mechs. So here we've got the Mauler, the Axeman, the Bushwhacker, and the Wolfhound. That is like an absolute, that is the definitive like Fedcom, like, what would you, it's a heavy lance, really, isn't it? I suppose. Oh, and I suppose it's got the Wolfhound in there. Again, that's another inconsistency. You usually wouldn't find lances like that. You'd usually find like 2 assaults and 2 heavies. Here, there's the Wolfhound in there though. But I don't really care about that in terms of the narrative side. I wanted this to reflect what was going on in that time period, and obviously the Mauler, the Axeman, the Bushwhacker, and the Wolfhound are very synonymous with that clan invasion era. Wolfhound not so much. I mean, Wolfhound's an earlier mech, but you see, for me, the Wolfhound 2 or the WLF2 is such a great mech, whereas the WLF1 he's still good, but it's a little bit lacking. So I think the Wolfhound really comes into its own like during the clan invasion. And there's nothing to say really about the Moa, the X-Man, the Bushwhacker. They're all superb. Next up, we got the third company. I'll probably start speeding up a little bit now because I'm acutely aware of time. But we've got here. This is Celestial Company, and this is entirely This is entirely created from the clans. The Dusk Haunters, I'll talk about the clan invasion now, but I'll backtrack eventually and talk about the War of 3039 because there are a lot of units that come up at that point for them, but it's much more. There are some mechs, but there are much more like vehicles and artillery and stuff like that because it's for the war of the inner sphere as opposed to, like that mass influx of mechs that come around during the post-clan invasion era, which is where we're at now in terms of the core regiment, the core battalion, or the first battalion. So what happens with the Dusk Haunters? They get in all manner of fun with Clan Smoke Jaguar. At this point, they're really quite powerful. Like they're powerful in relatively speaking. In the wider context of BattleTech, though, they're still a very small outfit. I mean, they're not even a battalion really at this point in time. It's kind of the clan invasion in a sense makes them. But the one thing that I always wrote for the Dusk Haunters is just how sneaky they are. They have to be. Like they're much more. They don't have the numbers or the power. They're not the Wolf's Dragoons, so they've got to play things a lot smarter. They usually tend to use their brain to solve things as opposed to like brute force. And when they basically get commissioned by Fedcom, because there is obviously like an informal alliance between the Draconis Combine and Fedcom during the clan invasion. The Dusk Haunters as well have a lot of ties with the Draconis Combine through the initial mech warrior who's piloting the Lancelot in the first lance that they get. That lady has ties with the Draconis Combine. So in a sense, I think this is me like I've thought about this a little bit as well. It's like like the old BattleTech cartoon. They do something very similar in that with Adam Steiner and is it Franklin Sakamoto? Where he's Franklin's the Draconis Combine, and Adam Steiner is obviously the the Fedcom or Lyran, whatever it's call him. He's both at that point, and it's like about the tension that exists between those two powers. I kind of did something similar, I think, but I didn't mean to do it. I think it's just something that's in my brain from the cartoon that I wanted to develop. But in my case, there's obviously a hell of a lot more history at that point between what's the Draconis Combine element of the Dusk Haunters and the Federated Sons or the Fedcom element of the Dusk Haunters. So the tension is there, but when the clan invasion kicks off and those tensions dissipate, at that time they're a really quite competent mercenary outfit who get commissioned to go and fight the clans. And one of the first things that they do, and this is, I think, in the entire echelon of the Dusk Haunters history, there's two things that they do that you'd consider quite, great, for want of a better term. They're not a real plot armor driven mercenary outfit who are getting involved with all the powers that be. They're usually kind of acting in the peripheries or the shadow of things and just kind of trying to get along. But the two things that they do, I'll talk about one of them separately. But the first, this one here, is they basically dupe an entire star of Clan Smoke Jaguar to become their bondsman. I've not quite decided how they're going to do that yet. I've got some good ideas though, I think, but that really turns the tide for them, because at that point then they've got this just exceptional technology, and this happens again. It's like the one of two exceptional things that they do. So having access to a Mad Cat, a Thor, a Vulture, and a Shadow Cat is quite game changing, especially in a force where they actually get. And I actually own this. The aerospace assets, a broadsword, a dropship that they've got. So that kind of mitigates all the problems with saying, well, how would they maintain Omnimex? Well, they've got it. They don't just get the mechs, they actually get the broadsword dropship as well. So that then allows them to kind of take that entire force. It's only a small force, but it's still quite game changing, and I don't think that happens very often during the clan invasion. But off the back of that then, and this is because at this time the Draconis Combine element within the Dusk Haunters becomes far more influential, they start to kind of get they've got contacts within the clan, like echelons of power, and they're able to kind of develop an actual company. They decide to build it on inner sphere, like military ethos, though, so they work in lances, they don't work in stars, which is kind of a bit of a bone of contention for the clan people involved in this, because eventually the clans become just like completely like folded into the power elements within the Dusk Haunters. So they're not really bondsmen anymore. At that point, they're just part of the mercenary outfit. And they do hire. You can see here, I've got a Draconis Combine element in here who basically get a load of second line mechs. Again, they do that because at this point, even though the piece of Tukid is in force, the Dusk Haunters become a very like anti-clan organisation. Although there is respect there for sure. That does usually happen with the Draconis Combine. The Draconis Combine have, they allow Clan Novacat to settle in their territory. So it's not like there is just an unbridled hatred of the clans. In fact, not at all. I think there is a mutual respect for sure. Or there's certainly respect from the Draconis Combine to the clans. That's why I've factored those in. And then they get a Nova Cat Lance as well. So that's a Daichi, a Takina, a Night Gear, and a Huntsman. The inner sphere name for that, Nuraborinin. So it's quite difficult to say. Next up, we got the final company, which is Daredevil Company. This is in the 1st Regiment. This, again, the time frames are out here because this gets defined quite quickly. So this is another mercenary unit that joins the Dusk Haunters in 3028 to give them that extra power. So that's a Sentinel, a Jenna, a Spider, and a Mercury. They then basically have more, say there's that St. Ives element there again. So St. Ives Mech Warrior, they get a Phoenix Hawk, a Firestarter, a Valkyrie, and a Mongoose in 3029. So that's like a little detachment that they get, which is basically a very scouty detachment while they're in St. Ives territory. And then finally they've got there, because at this time period, they're big enough now to have a graduate program for mech warriors, which you'd have to have as mech warriors come and go or get killed. You need replacements. So when people graduate from that program, they basically fit into the scouting to Daredevil Company, and that is the Raven, the Locust, the Wasp, and the Stinger. So very lo-fi lance, that just very, very quick. Obviously the Raven there. It's the 1X version that they've got in 3025 to 3050. So that's the one that's got basically it's like a proto ECM. I can't remember. I'm sure it's not as good as what the ECM eventually becomes, but it's allowing me to get a bit of the special tech on the BattleTech table during that early period. Next up, we got our 2nd battalion. So this is Command and Specialist Battalion, battalion number 2 in the regiment. This is the one I was saying previously about the clans being that when they basically dupe the Smoke Jaguar to give them to get them as bondsmen. The second amazing thing that they do is they find a drop ship from the SLDF era, and that's what they're doing with that Comstar and that the disgraced Comstar person. That's what they are looking for. And on this little excursion they find an Atlas 2, a Night Star, a Highlander, and a Black Knight. So these 4 here. And again, you can see a lot of these are the B variants, the Black Knight 6B variant there, which is an incredible version of the Black Knight. Same with the Highlander, that's the B variant. That's the variant, if you played the Hairbrain Schemes game, it's the Highlander that you get gifted halfway through the game. It's exactly the same version, so very, very powerful. What eventually happens, because they do, as well as being influenced by the clans, the Draconis Combine, they also get influenced by Comstar, so eventually they swap out a lot of their forces to become these what I would traditionally call an augmented lance, but that's kind of a Capellan thing. So this is more going on the what we call the Demi Company, which is a very a 6 pointed company, which is what Comstar come up with. It's one of the main initiatives to go and defeat the clans. So that's what happens here. So you can see they add in a rifleman and a Kodiak, which that Kodiak one is very, very silly on my part, but I had to have a Kodiak in the Dusk Haunters, they had to go into this weird and wonderful, amazing command like demi company that they had, which is just excessively powerful. Covers so much as well. Like, you're probably thinking, why is there a rifleman in? That's an odd choice. It's because it's got the anti-aircraft targeting tag in there, which is obviously quite useful. If depending on what kind of mission you're playing. So that is like the second real special endeavor that they have, is this demi company here, which is exceptionally powerful. Then in 3054, they actually get access to a C3 network. So it's a Cyclops, an Awesome, a Hatamoto, Chia, Thunderbolt, a Grand Dragon, and a Spider. Two of these are not connected to the network. So the Awesome it's the 9MA, which I think's got like command capabilities. It's got some kind of extra tech in its head. I can't remember what it is. I think it's like an extra cockpit or something like that. I can't remember. The Thunderbolt, I think, is just kind of the heavy in that, and therefore just in case you need that extra firepower. But the main kind of aspect to that demi company, or that lance there, is the Formex that have got the C3 built in, and that's obviously it is a command thing, right? So I've kind of listed this. This is the junior officers take the the C3 network, and the glorious 331st, which is obviously a reference to Clan Wolverine, that's the senior officers there, and the colonel or the major, whoever that is at the time, gets the Highlander. Quick note on that, I should give some background. The glorious 331st, the dropship that they find is actually from the power that eventually does become Clan Wolverine. But it's one of the, it's from that 331st Star League force, and it's just like an off-story narrative when they go and do some lost tech hunting. So they just call the Lance after them. Next up, we got the Tactical Deployment Company. So this is a weird one, and now we're kind of getting into the next Kickstarter stuff. So this is made up of 2 Goliaths, 2 Scorpions, and 2 Assassins, called the Mountain Goats. Why I put them in there is because, like, the Assassin at this time, because this is quite an early lance they get, this is 3029. Although I think the Goliath is, sorry, I need to expand this a little bit just to show you. The Goliath kind of comes around again as a thing, really, in the 3050. So you can see there that they create the demi company with the Goliath in 3050. I think it is around in the kind of early era. But it's not a mech that I really associate with, like, the end of the Succession Wars. So basically, in 3029, they get the 2 Scorpions, the 2 Assassins, and then when they get the Goliaths, they add that in to make it the demi company. And obviously, quads are very secure on their feet, as you'd expect, because they've got 4 legs. But also the Assassin, which is an incredibly quick and jump, very, very good jump capable mech. Assassin is. It's mixed. I mean, it's pretty useless as far as tabletop goes, but I just think that ability to jump 7 in 3025 era is really, really great. You can also do a little cheeky trick with the Assassin, and if you get 1 level above your opponent who's a mech, you can jump behind them. If they're adjacent to that 1 level tier, you can jump on that next to them and kick them in the head, and if you get a 6, you basically get a headshot with a kick, which is devastating. So they are useful for some things, but thematically here, basically, I've built them in. It's the demi company that are there if we've got difficult terrain to master. So very, very effective jump capable mechs with quad mechs. And then here, this is tactical deployment. So this is more like the Dark Arts demi company now. And you remember that I said that they got the Clan Smoke Jaguar. That they got bondsman for that. Well, the 5th part of that of the star, because you'd see it was 4 mechs. It was the Mad Cat, the Thor, the Vulture, and the Shadow Cat. The 5th element of that is the Elementals. And basically, because the Dusk Haunters have got no interest in having, they cannot facilitate, excuse me, the 5-star lance within the wider force, so they basically drop everything back down to regular inner sphere lances. So the Elementals, who are not happy about this, basically get given their own force, and they managed to get hold of a Battle Cobra, which is obviously an Omni-Mech, so that's kind of the chariot for the Elementals. And then there's some new tech in there, so the Shadowhawk, the Blackjack, the Raven, and the Locust 2C. So it's just a mix, mix and match. But that's a really powerful force. Is that it's got really everything you need for like quick and run attacks. So if you want to do like objective captures and holds, it's a really quite crunchy little lance. Is that one? Oh, it's not demi company. Next up, we got the clan counter company, and this is where things start getting like very much into the next Kickstarter and the forces that we're getting here. So the first one is this is like 3056. They get access to this. This is Faust's Ghost. This actually ties into a story that I'd written for them in 3025. It's one of the sons of a character that they come across. That person is the pilot of the Banshee here. So at this point, they are a FedCom captain. So I've written that wrong. FedCom Commonwealth. That's wrong. I think I just copy and pasted incorrectly, so I'll have to go and delete that. So it's just FedCom captain. This is Mephistopheles, an Atlas of Banshee, a Guillotine, the Star Slayer. Star Slayer obviously is coming in the next Kickstarter. I've then got a. This is the improved C3 network here. So this is C3 is I'm not going to go into that now. It's just like tech that the Inner Sphere used to counter the clans. Quite powerful as well. The other one, like the C3 company from before, has got like the old system in there, or the system that comes out first. This is the 3060 era, so this is the improved C3 software. And this is quite a powerful lance, actually. A Flashman, a Lancelot, the Tesson, which is an interesting mech, and a Crab. And they've all got that improved C3 in there, so it's more effective. And then we've got another FedCom force here. So this is a Devastator, a Sagittaire, the Hatchet Man, which is the 6D, which is coming in the new Mercenary force, I believe. It's one with a Rotary Cannon 5 in there, so looking forward to that. So I've never seen them do a Rotary Cannon yet, so I'm interested to see how that looks in plastic. And a Griffin there as well. And this is the 3M variant of the Griffin, which is a really powerful Griffin. It's like a massive upgrade from the initial. Is it like the 2D? I think I say 2D. I might have just made that up, but the kind of stock variant Griffin. It's a big step up from that. Then we got the Experimental Tech company. So this is first one here is the first lance is a Berserker, a Hauptmann, a Penetrator, and the Night Sky. So these are all Lyran. Like a Lyran lance that they come across called the Old Triangle, very much an Irish thing that. This is basically like there is that like massive influx in technology. They kind of combine as well to this clan counter company, because you could say that the C3 stuff is very, or the improved C3 is very much like this weird and wonderful experimental tech. But these are all like mechs that, like for instance, the Hauptmann is an Omni-mech. It's an Inner Sphere Omni-mech. What else we got here? We got like the Gunslinger, which is like a really, really powerful mech that comes in and around this time as well. So what I've done here is it's just trying to see on this force. It's the Ides of March. That's a Gunslinger, a Caesar, the Helios, and the Cossack. There's more old models in here because we are not actually getting. There's been no confirmation we're getting these models in the new plastic, so I've had to get many more here than I would have done. My regular just like one per company has been expanded here. And then finally, one of my absolute favourite lances that I have got, which is Capella's Wrath, which is the Lao Hu, the Seed Sang, or the Sai Sang. I think that is it the T that's silent in that, I believe. So the Tai Sang, the Wraith, and the Vindicator. That Vindicator is the new Vindicator that you get in the box set. In the new beginners box set. So really glad to get that. That is like the ultimate 3063 Capellan lance. It's absolutely glorious. Awesome. Now we're kind of getting into the real where I've not got much actually at all yet. Or I've got some of it, but a lot of it is kind of determined on the next Kickstarter. So this is the third battalion here. This is the Cadet and Auxiliary battalion. And first we got the Cadet company. So these are really. They're not bad mechs, but I mean they're very there's a Centurion, a Blackjack, a Hatchetman, an Urban Mech, a Locust, and a Piranha. That is again much like what I was talking about previously. It starts with a lance in 3025. Eventually they expand that out into a demi company by adding a Piranha and the Centurion. This is Palisade, and this is where the Cadets now sit. So this is Epsilon Group, and then there's Gamma Group, and Gamma Group is comprised of a Charger, a Chameleon, a Hermes 2, a Whitworth, a Clint, and a Firefly. If you know anything about most of the mechs here, you'll know that they're not very good, or they've got quite a bad reputation. So like the Clint, not great really. The Hermes 2, bit dodgy. The Charger, which is, I'm going to use it from the new Kickstarter, so it's the massive 80-ton mech that has 5 small lasers on it. So it's really, well, yeah, it's an interesting one anyway. I mean, I'm not saying it's bad, because you can obviously do lots of good melee with that Charger, but I think as an 80-ton mech with 5 S lasers is slightly bizarre, but it is what it is, and it gives it a lot of flavour. So I really did want one of them in the force. I think from a fluff perspective, it's very much like, well, I'm going to have to train the cadets how to use an assault mech. So it's really good for that. The Chameleon as well, which is in here. The Chameleon which I think is coming in the actual Mercenary box set. It's famously like a training mech, so that obviously went in there as well. Next up, we've got the 3039th Fraternity Company. So this is when they basically get to the War of 3039, the Dusk Haunters get commissioned by FedCom to fight the Draconis Combine. They get, basically, what I've tried to do, I've tried to build this in with some of the mercenary companies that I really like, particularly the Crescent Hawks and is it Lyndon's Company, I think they're called. I always want to say Lyndon's Battalion, but I don't think it is. I think it's Lyndon's Company. So it's like mech warriors that were with them and either went on some kind of sabbatical and decided not to go back, or they decided to break away, and they somehow ended up finding themselves with the Dusk Haunters. So the Butcher Hawks here, that's the Osrock, the Ossold, the Dervish, and the Commando. We've then got an actual. This is very much like a Federated Sons lance here, so Battlemaster, a Victor, an Enforcer, and a Wolfhound. You can even their name, the mechs, like they've called the Victor Avalon, they're named after, well, they're called the Foxhounds, obviously, probably named after old, the Fox himself, the leader of the Federated Sons, Hans Davian. And then finally there we've got Lyndon's Fanatics, and that's an awesome. I did want another awesome in the pack. I especially like the old awesome as well, the old metal version. A Crusader, a Panther, and a Jenner. So in kind of a lore perspective, it's like these guys have been fighting the Draconis Combine, who hate mercenary companies, by the way. They don't like them. So they've joined up with the Dusk Haunters for whatever reason. I think the Dusk Haunters kind of do fulfill that kind of ideal a little bit, is that they, even at an early stage, they combine with other mercenary units, so they're not just like one, it's not like the Wolves Dragoons, who are just like one really orchestrated force. They're kind of a mix and an amalgamation of all the different powers and different mercenary companies, and there's a democratic element to them as well. For instance, I wrote in that they actually elect their leader, which actually is quite fun. That, like, you can have some like really interesting political shenanigans go on, like in the corridors of power. Next up, this is one of my favourite companies, actually. This is the Clan Emigre Company. So these are basically the displaced after the clan invasion, who, for whatever reason, end up in the Dusk Haunters. So you've got here, this is like a mixture of Draconis Combine and Free Rasselhard Republic, and they're basically just like not very good mechs, but they're very feisty individuals who pilot them, which you'd have to be. So it's a Cicada, an Urbi, a Javelin, and a Flea. Then possibly my second favourite lance outside of the of Kismet lance, which is the original Dusk Haunters lance, is this that I've got here, which is the Haitian Rose. They're basically based off the Blackthorn's military forces. They are like an anti-clan force, who I love because I'm not a fan of the clans, but I kind of built it in that these guys were so serious and so vengeful and so bloodthirsty against the clans, even the Blackthorns couldn't deal with it, but the Dusk Haunters could, because the Dusk Haunters hate the clans as well. Or that mutual respect is, it means that they'll go and try and kill them. It's not just that they're kind of fawning over them. They do not like them or what they do to the inner sphere. And this is like, I've kind of written this into this is where I kind of deviate a little bit from like canon. Because I've got the Hammerhead in here. The Hammerhead, if you know, is actually, you can see I actually list the quirks in the mechs. I've actually listed this one as experimental, because the Hammerhead, if you don't know, is a mech that is like, this is 100 years before it comes into the BattleTech universe. But in my kind of like head canon for this, This group, this Haitian Rose, are so like bombastic. They went and raid like a clan factory somewhere and get one of their prototype mechs. So it's not true. I mean, that really wouldn't happen, but just for the flavour. So they actually have a hammerhead, and I've kind of listed it that it has all the hammerhead properties. So I will play it with it's got like somewhat hardened armour, and it's got like the AMS system in the legs, and just technology that doesn't exist yet in this era. But as well, another thing I'm just using, it's a bit of a spurious thing to do. They've got a Wolfhound 2C, which is the Grinner variant. That wouldn't happen because that was a mech specifically made for Feel and Kel. So, again, not really true. But it's just a flavoursome little lance, this. And then they've also got a Griffin 2C and a Jenna 2C. And I kind of have that of like the clan mechs that they've hunted down. That's why... that's the salvage that they've got from it. They're all named after, if you know anything about Haitian history or Haitian religion, more specifically the voodoo religion. There's Mata de la Rosa, Tonton Makute, Baron Samedi, and Maman Brigitte. Voodoo's a really interesting religion. It's like a heady mixture of like Catholic saints and like an African variant of that religion. So Mata Dolorosa is basically Mother Della Rosa. So it's because it's very, very Catholic, right? But then you've got Baron Samedi and Tonton Makut. Tonton Makut's actually named after quite horrifying. Actually, there was a horrifying dictator in Haiti during the 60s. His name's flown out of my head, but his like mercenary force was called the Tonton Makut. It's actually named after an ogre in like Haitian religion or law, so that's where I've got these names from. They do sound pretty cool. I'm going to kind of paint them all up black as well, I think. I've got the Wolfhound 2C and the Hammerhead already. I'm just waiting on the next Kickstarter to fulfill that. And then next up we got the Gougers, again like that first lance here, like the Scalpers. That's a quick draw and Enfield, a Vulcan and a Firestarter, so they'll be lighting things up with that Vulcan and the Firestarter. Then we've got, this is going on forever, isn't it? But we've got the Dusk Haunters Exiled Clan Company. This is again another like a completely clan force. So Twilight Empire, that's a Kingfisher, a Warhawk, a Nova Cat, and an Ebon Jaguar, which is about as crunchy as you can get. In particular, I've got the... I'm thinking, I've not listed it here, but I'm giving serious thought to changing that Ebon Jaguar to the D variant, which is an incredible variant. But if I do that, I'll have to proxy it. That's sorry, I should say as well, that's Clan Wolf in Exile. So again, these are the clans now that are kind of falling away from the clans and joining the Inner Sphere powers. I've then got some Clan Bandit cast forces, so these are all second line mechs here. It's the Bane, the Phoenix Hawk 2C, the Hellhound, and a Great Worm, which is a cool little mech. And then I've added in some Clan Goliath Scorpion as well, because I do love Clan Goliath Scorpion. In fact, if I was ever going to play clans, I would play Clan Goliath Scorpion, but I'm going to collect the force, so I'm going to have like probably a cheeky like 10 mechs for them or something, but I wanted them in the Dusk Haunters, and they're quite they're very crunchy actually. The Highlander 2C, the Viper, the Rifleman 2C, which is a glorious mech, much unlike the Inner Sphere version of the Rifleman, which is very bemoaned. The Rifleman 2C is insanely powerful, and the Shadowhawk 2C there as well. And we're nearly there, folks. So now we've got the Reinforced Support and Artillery Battalion. First one here is my very, very small infantry company. I don't really play that much infantry in BattleTech, but I wanted at least a company. And we've got here some just conventional infantry, so that's just one platoon. That's 4 units. Each one's got 7 soldiers on there. And then these are all into lances as well. It's kind of weird, isn't it? Like they're in 4s. It's not technically a lance because that's a battle mech thing, but they're in 4s. Then we've got I should say as well that the conventional infantry I've got are from the St. Ives. They pick those guys up there. It's like a special force unit. They've then got the Lyran New Wave Stompers, so that's the Sloths and the Infiltrator Mark 1's battle armour. And then we get, because they're, actually I don't mind the Sloths, they're very slow, but they're really quite powerful like in force, because if you've got 4 of them in a little like squad, they have 8 S lasers, so you can do quite a nice bit of damage actually if you get up close with one of them, but getting up close is difficult. And then finally, then we've got the upgrades, which is the inner sphere, like regular battle armor, which I've put here the Free Rasselkag Republic hefty studs. So it's just lads that they pick up from the Rasselkag Republic in battle armor. They're quite powerful as well, and I've got enough Omnimex to be able to run them very effectively. And as you'll see when we get down this through, I have got like vehicles for transport and stuff like that. Next up, we've got the skirmish support. So this is two LRM carriers, two SRM carriers, and then I've got two of the old, actually that should say old model in brackets there, I've just forgotten to put it in. That's for the yeoman there. The yeoman's is it called the boombox? I think everyone calls it. It's basically just like a walk-in missile rack on legs. So much like I had with the assassins before, who were in that force with the two with the 4 quad mechs, the yeoman's the same. Like I'm not a massive fan of it, but for purposes of like theme, like having that alongside LRM and SRM carriers makes sense because it's just a walk-in missile platform. And then I have got here like sling force as well, so that's a hoplite or 2 hoplites, 2 vedettes and 2 galleons. Same kind of principle, but with these it's more like just a little bit more like skirmish support, not just like an LRM spam. It's actually, there's a bit more to like the hoplite and the vedette and the galleon, but they're all not very good, so they just kind of use there as like, you know, a little bit of cannon fodder almost. Especially the hoplite as well, not a great mech. Or the hoplite, sorry. I don't know why I call it hoplite. Hoplite. Right, we got the heavy support company next. This is really quite crunchy. We got 2 Ontos, a Morigu, a Zukov, and 2 Manticores. So that's the first force. That's Southpaw. And then we got 2 Behemoths, 2 Demolishers, and 2 Shreks. Very, very crunchy that. Next up, we've got, most of these have got no model, so this is just the artillery support. So that's mine layers, mine sweepers, mobile thumper cannons, and mobile long toms. The reason I've listed them in again because it marches on paper is because I do use that support pack, and that does include artillery in there. So it's just to kind of marry up the force with the kind of mechanics that I will be playing on tabletop. And then just a really cute one here. This is just 2 Oscouts and 2 Skulkers, like a lance, but it's actually called the Doom Spotters. Literally like very, very little firepower there, but just there to do scouting for the artillery if it's needed. And then we got the final part of the reinforced battalion here, which is Air and Aviation Battalion. So this is the 5th battalion then, right? Yes, I think it's the 5th. I think that's a reinforced. Yeah. A reinforced regiment then is 5 battalions, or can be upwards of a maximum of 5 battalions, which is what we got here. And that the first one here, which is basically air cav, so that's 2 Pegasus, 2 cavalry. Confusing, that's what the VTOLs are called. I wish they'd give them a more interesting name than cavalry, but they're quite good. They're basically like vehicle hunters, and 2 warriors, which I'll be using the new sculpts for that when we get that in the next Kickstarter. And then we've got that's Swarm. Obviously that's like very that's quite fast, effective little like air cav there. And then we've got just hover vehicles here, so that's Throng, and that's 2 Condors, 2 Drill Slugs, and 2 Saladins. No models on any of these apart. We'll talk about the Jägermech separately. There's actually an anti-air company, so that's kind of the conventional fighters. I do that to kind of marry up with a support lance pack that you can get, like the card pack, because there is something in there where like someone can play like a card to say that they're doing an airstrike, and then you can play a counter card. So that's like what I've got here is like conventional fighters. So their fighter bomber comes in and my fighter comes and blows them up so they can't do their attack. I've also just like written in again just to match on paper, self-propelled air defense systems, and then 2 Jägermechs in there as well. Jägermechs are not very good mechs, but they have got that very nice quirk, if you play quirks, of the anti-aircraft targeting, which gives you a bonus against aircraft. Next 2, these are the last ones of the formal regiment here. So that's 6 conventional bombers, which are basically all in a squadron, 6 conventional fighter bombers, and then 6 conventional aerospace fighters and 6 conventional aerospace bombers. You can see that the timelines on this just develop as we go up. So by the time we get into the Con invasion, it's just more feasible that a mercenary outfit would have access to, you know, stuff like aerospace bombers and fighters. Not really sure that anyone outside of the real top mercenary units in 3025 would have that. So the Dusk Haunters certainly don't. And then we got the very last thing here, which is just kind of the extra logistical transport stuff. So two Maxims, which is coming in the next Kickstarter. They're basically just hover infantry transports. One Indra, one Karnov. Karnov is a VTOL. Basically just like a troop dropping like VTOL unit. We've got two Badgers, one just regular helicopter. I have that. It's actually one of the old Ralpatha attack VTOLs, but because we're getting replacements for that, I just moved it out and put it into it's literally like if I need anything to play like as an objective or for a courier mission or something like that, there's a regular helicopter in there. And we got one Shagosa and one Patron. They're both Lodamex. I basically just used a Wasp and a Stinger, and I think I cut all its weapons off and proxied it into these Lodamex. And then we got I'm just calling Dusk Haunter personnel, which is basically 5 little dudes on a stand, just again to potentially be used for like objectives or special missions or whatever. And then finally we got the 2 aerospace dropships. That's the Leopard and the Broadsword, which I spoke about previously. That's the Solution and Black Shikiri. I think Black Shikiri is the river on Huntress, which is the Smoke Jaguar world. So that's what that's named after. Oh, that was long, and that's it. That is basically the entire Dusk Haunter force over that period. And again, I hope if you watched this all the way through, well done, because that was a lot of data. But I just wanted to show that I think that this really is kind of the final stage. I've said that a few times before, and it will change. I mean, when we get things like, we might get like a new sculpt of a mech that I really like. For instance, I think we might get the Pillager. The Pillager might just accidentally find its way into my force, and I might remove one of the mechs that I've got a duplication of. Like for instance, I've got like 2 Jenners, I've got 2 Victors, so I might like remove one of those and put the cheeky Pillager in, but it's not confirmed yet. Anyway, I think this video has gone on quite long enough, so thank you for sticking with it if you got to this stage. But again, I think it's just it's good to show stuff like that, to show just how deep you can go into force creation and how much fun you can have with it if you really want to kind of get into BattleTech. Anyway, I'll leave that here, and I'll hopefully catch you again next time.